Haitian peasants, and MST, the landless workers movement in Brazil, so my brain is scrambled between Haitian Creole and Portuguese for 2 weeks. And that brings me for greetings. I learned a lot about Montreal. Thank you, Heck. Thank you, Jam. Thank you. I am honored to be here today. And what I'm going to attempt to do is to connect Montreal to Detroit, to connect Detroit to Montreal, to lift up food justice movement, to promote some strategies and frames around food system work, and lastly, to act local and to think global. So I would just like us to pause and to think and send some good thoughts and some good energy to the peoples of the Philippines, who have suffered such a tremendous trauma to their country and to their community. Thank you. For those of us who haven't been in a hurricane, a tsunami, or earthquake, we have no idea. Only those who have been to war can contemplate the terror and the shock of what the Filipino community these last few days are facing. So, I'm Charity Hicks. I'm a policy director for East Michigan Environmental Action Council, but I'm also a policy fellow for equitable food and ag systems. I spend 1/3 of my time inside of Washington, D.C., wrestling lobbyists really, but wrestling the legislative bodies to kind of think about a human-scale, human-centered food system and not this perpetual growth, absurd growth system that we're under. So, oh, wow, I'm sorry. So, Michigan, my home state, born and bred. So I'm African-centered. I'm part of Detroit's African-centered community. We're about a few 100,000 deep. If you come to the east side where I live, you will confuse it for West Africa. Because the city is predominantly, overwhelmingly African-descended United States American folk. Michigan is the second most agriculturally diverse state, second only to California. We grow everything, cherries and apples and corn and commodities. Our farmers are prolific, and it's represented in the full agricultural production in the state. So that brings me to bring some greetings. The first set of greetings I would like to bring to you is from the Detroit Food Justice Task Force. And then to the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, I have some Food Sovereignty Alliance stuff that I just happened to bring because we had an overabundance because Detroit was on the tour for the Food Sovereignty Prize. And so we hosted the Haitian peasants and the Brazilian community, Via Campesina, South America in Detroit. So, and lastly, from Detroit, they would get me if I didn't say it, what up, though? So that's Detroit's Ebonics for saying, hi, how are you doing, bonjour, you know. And thank you, Christian, Claire, and Jonathan. Thank you. Y'all rocked it. Thank you. So where we're at right now is, oh, what did I do? So I'm always thinking about food systems, right? How do we scale them up? How do we make them local? How do we make them sustainable? How do we promote the health, the well-being, the quality of life, the ecological integrity of places, particularly urban areas? So East Michigan Environmental Action Council started in 1970s in the green movement in the United States. And this is the footprint of where I'm working at. It's an environmental justice outfit, but they're terribly concerned with the full quality of our lives. And they represent a way for Detroit to build power to protect, preserve, and value the air, land, and water in Detroit. And that's a significant frame because I carry that wherever I go. Second, the Food Justice Task Force. It started in 2009, but actually it has its roots deeper in Detroit. Detroit is a car town. We build, we carry tools, we wrestle cars. But as of late, all of those jobs have left. The capitalists have sought cheaper labor worldwide and have abandoned us. And so currently right now, we have 200,000 people between 18 and 64 outside of the economic order. That's a legion of people. And so the Food Justice Task Force is working to improve the quality of life of low-income communities of color, because Detroit is 86% black. If you go there, your English is broken, you're going to hear some Ebonics, and you're going to forget, you don't know if you're in Port-au-Prince, you don't know if you're in Abuja, you don't know where you're at, because it has suffered 40 to almost 50 years of benign and malicious neglect. White folks abandon it, wealthy folks abandon it, until we're sexy now because we're being gentrified. So the Food Justice Task Force work is trying to repair and restore a localized and a regionalized food system. I start with First Nations all the time because in Detroit, there is the place of the Anishinaabe, who lands and memory and ecological placemaking we're sitting in. And so in the United States, there was a strong movement where indigenous peoples, First Nations, were called savages. And they were removed and housed on reservations. And part of me as a policy wonk is, whose narrative am I holding? Who's telling the story? I can't just show up in DC with a nice little project. It has to be framed in the lived experience of people, because all policy should lift and affirm people. So Detroit's story from 1701, when Antoine de la Motte Cadillac showed up and some French fur traders, became a story of industry and commercialization. It was a place of mound builders. We still got mounds there. You can imagine what agricultural lands are holding. It's a trade and industrial town. It's a majority African-American town. Poverty is 50%. And the assets and the grassroots brilliance is over the top. And you get that in places that are challenged. You get this profound brilliance. You get people showing up being human beings. And the current economic crisis is we are bankrupt. We're the largest municipal bankruptcy in probably U.S. history. And every town and village in the United States is looking at us. And I believe that our municipal employees are going to take the hit. They're going to be wounded economically. You could imagine the depression, the high blood pressure, the stress of working 20, 30, 40 years for a municipal authority and then having the rug pulled up from underneath you. The quality of life of the people of Detroit. This is a wonderful picture. So, as you can tell, we're attached to Windsor, Ontario, very intimately. Over half of our nurses that work in Detroit are from Windsor. So Canadians love on us every day. And we get the benefit of Canadian government's thrust in the health professions. And this monument is a freedom monument that's looking out towards Windsor, because this is the path that Harriet Tubman took, bringing African folks to freedom, to liberation. And in Detroit, we are one of the major nexuses of the Underground Railroad, and so all of our old buildings get little hatches to hide out in. And so all of our monuments and memorials are attempting to speak to our relationship to Windsor, to the Straits, to the Detroit River, to the Great Lakes Basin, but also to the legacy and the heritage of Detroit. Right now, Detroit is hurt. We have 86% people of color community, roughly around 800,000 people there. We lost 1.5 million people. As of April of 2013, our unemployment rate is 16%. That's what the government says. But in Detroit, we know it as 25%. We have 78,000 structures and 66,000 lots that are abandoned. And our homicides are up because of sheer desperation. 44% of the families in Detroit live in poverty, and half of all of our children are in abject poverty. So this is a map of Detroit breaking out by race and ethnic heritage. You can clearly see the delineation of Detroit. All of that blue is black folk, and everything that's red and pink are some white folk, and that little orange down is the Mexican and Latino community. This is unsustainable and unacceptable. Right now, 43,000 households have no running water in Detroit. So as I'm talking about food justice, right? Building a sustainable food system, making it local, making it regional, looking at our farmers and seeing what they produce, this is what the context that I, as a policy fellow representing Detroit, have to hold. If you don't have water, you're not cooking. You're not brushing your teeth. You're not flushing the toilet. You're not washing your clothes. You can imagine the truncated quality of life of our community. But still we rise. Businesses have all left Detroit. We have no major grocery store at all. We have a lot of fringe retailers. So this year, because of massive gentrification schemes, 2 moved in, a Whole Foods on Mack and Woodward, and a Myers on Woodward and 8 Mile Road. But Detroit is 140 square miles. It's a big city. It housed tens of thousands of auto workers, and right now their legacy is just a reduced and truncated quality of life. So to that end, Mary Gallagher did a study looking at food and health, food and quality of life, food and the environment. And so food access, quality, and health becomes important for us because we have some issues. And these issues make my work harder. And I have to figure it out with other people to advance Detroit's interests. So a study that was funded by LaSalle Bank, Mary Gallagher of Gallagher Research and Consulting Group, came to Detroit. Her findings were presented in June 2007, examining the impact of food deserts, places where there was no access to retail foods. And what she said was, as a group, the residents in food deserts statistically more likely to suffer or die prematurely from diet-related diseases than residents who live in areas with healthy food options are not under. We got over 50,000 type 2 diabetics in Detroit. You can imagine the medical costs. But this is from eating high-processed food. High-processed food. High fructose corn syrup, fillers, chemical calories that's contributing to high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, and obesity that makes Detroit have a 124% excess death rate than the whole entire rest of the state of Michigan. So my job is to move that whole community beyond junk food, fast food, and the culture of death. That's my work. Sometimes I crumble under it. But the majority of the time, I'm trying to think about, okay, what we eat every day is either going to add to our health, it's going to contribute to the promotion of us, or it's going to challenge us, right? How do I move 1 million people to a healthier consumption pattern? How do you do it? Because this is what we eat every day in Detroit, Coney Island. If you ever came to Detroit, Anthony Bourdain just did Parts Unknown, and he had a Detroit County, and he was an ecstatic experience. But that's not what we should be eating. We should be eating more fresh, more vegetables, more least processed foods. So the current convergence of issues in Detroit are epic. We got a people and economic opportunity problem. We got a land disposition and access. And we got urban ag. Right now in Detroit, we got 100 small farms and 10,000 people growing food. That's a movement. We went past tipping point. Now we're into, like, what are we holding? What is this? What is this lived agrarian, urban agrarian experience? But me as an environmental justice person, and when you test our soils and you see mercury, lead, and cadmium, you cringe. Because you're like, no, don't put a bell pepper there. So part of my job is to bio and photo remediate our soils. We're not in pristine agricultural areas. We're in an urban area that has smelters, heavy industry, heavy commercial sites that truncated, left a lot of heavy metals. Mercury, lead, and cadmium is in the fallout pattern of our old incinerators. You could just track it on the prevailing westerly, these leaded and mercury soils. So we got a lot of environmental injustice. We got a governance issue. We're being ran by an emergency financial manager, a dictator. And we got a mortgage and tax foreclosures. In 10 years, we had 67,000 foreclosures. So half of Detroit is homeless. And we got concentrated poverty, we got violence and depression, and gentrification and evictions. So currently, right now, the right of center groups in the United States are attempting to wipe out food stamps, which is our supplemental nutritional assistance program, which picks up and folds in all marginal populations, mostly the elderly and the very young, into a subsistence food program that they get a card and they purchase food with every month. And they want to wipe it out. Last Friday, we had what we call a first mandatory reduction in benefits. And now we have a significant portion of our population that's profoundly food insecure. Right now in the United States, there's 47 million Americans in that program. The average benefit is $132 US dollars. Most of the participants work for Walmart and Burger King and McDonald's. They're the working poor, because they refuse to pay them a living wage. So their income is so low and so depressed that they qualify for a program for vulnerable citizens. In Michigan, 1.7 million Michigans are in that program. And in the Metro Detroit area, 775,000. And in Detroit, the county seat of Wayne, is 520,000 people, the majority of whom are children. So this is a policy space I have to work in. So now you can see the stress and the pain and why the food justice movement has turned food as a human right on the same scale as safety and as water. So I'm a policy fellow. These are my colleagues. And I've been working on the Farm Bill in the United States. The subsidies to big ag, the amount of disdain towards poor people is so pronounced inside of Washington, D.C. that it's even hard to be there. So this is my rooting in my policy. It's called the Healthy Food Financing Initiative. It came out of Michelle Obama, our First Lady's program for healthier access. And in the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, is supporting the projects to increase access to healthy, affordable foods in communities that currently lack the options. And Detroit is definitely the poster child for the program. So through a range of programs, it's 3 federal agencies: the Treasury, purse haver, the Health and Human Services Agency, who has to deal with all of the diet-related impacts of eating a high-processed diet, and the Department of Agriculture. Currently, right now, it's a brand new program. I'm going to leverage it. And residents and communities who are sometimes called food deserts typically rely on fast foods. And that's why if you go to Detroit, on every corner, it's a Coney Island and a fast food spot. You can get Church's Chicken. You can get McDonald's. We got, it's shocking. They're in the hundreds. They're everywhere. It's like somebody carpet bombed Detroit with fast food outlets. So, good food policy. My work is to build a local and a regional food system inside of Detroit. So, I hang out with farmers. particularly the organic and the heirloom ones and the biodynamic, and people who like to steward the land in an agroecologist fashion like Via Campesina, because the carbon footprint they're holding, their relationship to land and to place, and the biodiversity of their work is reparative and restorative, and we need more of that. I'm working with school food environment and food additives. We got too much red and yellow in our food. We shouldn't be eating all these dyes. I'm sorry, y'all. I mean, M&Ms, I like them, but we shouldn't be having red and yellow and blue and green and gold and all of that, because we're being guinea pigs. Community, school, food pipeline. Why shouldn't a farmer deliver straight to the schools? Really? I mean, why do we feed our babies junk? More resources inside of the USDA for consumer education and food system diversity. All the money go to the big guys. Where are the small operators at? You're making an agricultural system that's too big to fail, like the banks just did. And when they fail, we're going to be lined up to bail them out. An Office of Urban Ag inside of HUD. Right now, in over 50 cities across the United States, is an urban ag movement. Cleveland is one, Detroit is one, New York is one. People are doing rooftop and beekeeping and microgreens and hops and microbrewing, and everything is burgeoning around food and food systems in an urban environment. And we need to build a stronger relationship to local Detroit community members, public policy creation, rulemaking, and public participation. My job is to get people and to wake them up and to send them to their legislative office and say, this is what we want. And you're going to do it because you're my servant. It's pretty gangster. We need some gangster. And the Healthy Food Financing Initiative is my rooting. So this panel asked me a question, right? I was like, really? Heck, really? So what I was thinking about was, for universities particularly, keep doing what you're doing. What a wonderful symposium. That's what we need. So for you, oh wow, that print is so small. But I'm going to read it. It says to build strong two-way relationships with local community. 2, to bring the power of academic work to problem solve with the impacted. So y'all got some brain power. Y'all got these wonderful professors, and they should leave their offices every now and then and show up in community and think how to build a community and university partnership. Be a convener of community-based collaboratives, work, thank you, Jan, and build justice reflecting back into communities with findings and recommendations. Everything that y'all report on Montreal need to be presented in an impacted community in Montreal. That is justice. People need to hear, oh, you thought about us? You did some analytics? You crunched some numbers? You read some data? You did some mapping? Well, we would like to have that information too. Be more responsive to current situations in the community. Don't turn a blind eye. If something is moving in Montreal, jump on it. And help create good local regional food policy. Where's the policy recommendations? Who's thinking about it? Where's the think tank, the policy centers? And lastly, be aware of racism, classism, and other forms of hierarchy and control, and promote justice. That means if somebody is missing, and you get in a room, and you know somebody ain't up in here, how do you build the space, the entry point for the margins to come to the center? That's important. Because what will happen is you'll turn into the savior. And communities need leadership development, capacity, standing, agency, voice. And they don't often get it because we show up as advocates and saviors and we know better. But the community has brilliance. And we need to think about how to leverage that. For rural communities, help to build a local and regional food system in a frame called a regional food shed. And I asked somebody, what's the regional food shed for Montreal? Where is it? Who's sourcing? Where's the majority of the food that Montreal folk eat? Where is it coming from?